I should have been shaken when, on a business trip, Terry accused me of cheating and then, with his thunderous voice over the phone, requested a divorce. Still, I was unmoved. I was aware that this was just another of his flamboyant tantrums. From a distance, I could feel his emotions quiver, but I was ready. It was almost comical that he taught me fooled by his theatrical performance. I was alternating between light amusement and frustration as his unfounded allegations kept up against my unwavering resolve. However, during this exchange, I started to feel in control. This wasn't just a small argument. For me, it was a turning point. I smirked to myself at his pitiful attempt to change my mind. Then, in a sudden and crucial epiphany, I realized it was my turn to initiate contact. My name is Megan, and I've worked at a college bookstore continuously since I graduated from junior college at the age of 21. I'm 30 years old. Terry, on the other hand, is 3 years my senior, and his career has not been the best. He was always changing jobs or unemployed when we initially met 2 years ago. He proposed marriage right away, but I insisted on one condition: he had to have a reliable job. I was determined that we would not get married unless our financial future was secured. I saw his concerned look and said firmly, "Okay, but there's a condition. Marriage is off the table if you can't find a steady job. We must think about the future." With a casual remark, "Don't worry, you're working, so there's no rush, right?" he attempted to brush it off. Terry said, "But my parents would be worried if I got married without a steady job," after I made the requirement clear. Before we would give marriage a serious thought, he committed to finding employment. He started looking for work after gaining a greater sense of responsibility, and he finally obtained an office position at a construction business. We were able to proceed with our wedding arrangements as a result. Although I thought Terry's professional path and financial handling were a little risky at the time, I thought our styles would work well together. I wanted him to help me build on my abilities while I helped him become more frugal with money. But I had no idea that the biggest difficulties we faced were still to come. When we were looking into buying a house, around a year into our marriage, Terry delivered a bombshell. He casually remarked, "I might not be able to get a mortgage one day." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I insisted for further information. "I might need a guarantor for the mortgage because I haven't been in my job for very long," he clarified. "My dad is the only one who could assist, but he's overburdened by his debt from gambling." "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Considering that the real estate agent and the contract were sitting right there, I was shocked. Ever unfazed, Terry merely offered, "It should be all right if we put the house in your name, right? You'll have no trouble getting the loan because you've been at your employment for a long time. Each of us can pay a portion of the mortgage. It's merely a matter of detail." "That's not the point," I argued, feeling the frustration simmer. "Why didn't you bring this up earlier? This affects me too, and I'm not even prepared with the necessary paperwork." Although he apologized, his remorse seemed shallow, lacking genuine depth. Despite my desire to press the issue further, the contract was already on the table, pushing us into a corner. With the real estate agent present, I chose not to escalate the situation further. Reluctantly, I hurriedly gathered the necessary documents, like my income statement, needed for the loan application, and in a spur-of-the-moment decision, finalized the purchase of the house under my name. Doubts gnawed at me. Could I truly see a future with this man? Perhaps I should have firmly stated that we wouldn't proceed instead of rushing to prepare the paperwork. My anxiety only deepened with the potential problem of my father-in-law's financial instability. Just the other day, I was talking to Dad. Terry started one evening, his voice casual. He mentioned he might lose his house because of the debts I told you about, so he's thinking about moving in with us. Is that okay with you? Why would you even consider that without discussing it first? I responded instantly, frustration rising. Terry just shrugged. Well, he's in trouble, and my brother is working abroad and can't help. I'm the only one Dad can turn to. Maybe we could let him stay with us temporarily, at least until he sorts out his situation. But having him live with us permanently, that's a huge decision, I pointed out. Terry frowned. You just don't want him to stay, do you? If he moves in, we could split the living expenses. You're always talking about money, the money that you never seem to contribute, I retorted sharply. You promised we'd split the mortgage, but I'm the only one paying. You haven't contributed at all. In a marriage, finances are supposed to be shared. It's not just my money. It's supposed to be ours. It's only coming out of my account because the house is in my name. You're being incredibly self-centered. My voice was thick with exasperation, but Terry muttered under his breath, I hate discussing money, before storming out of the room. Such disputes became a regular occurrence in our home. Every time, Terry would dismiss my concerns, leaving unresolved tensions to simmer. Despite the unresolved tensions between us, Terry didn't ignore his family situation entirely. As part of his job in construction site administration, which often entailed dealing with real estate contracts, he actively sought advice from a particular agency on how to secure the best deal for selling his family's home, including all the necessary procedures. I often caught snippets of these discussions, and although they were a constant reminder of our issues, it was somewhat comforting to know he was taking action. However, the thought of my in-laws possibly moving in with us after the sale of their home loomed over me like a dark cloud. Terry began attending meetings with real estate agents and even included his parents, but without my involvement. His weekends started to fill up with trips away from home, and eventually he left for a prolonged business trip to oversee a construction site far away. At the time, I didn't fully grasp it, but the seeds of our ongoing power struggle had been planted. A few days after Terry left, I decided to indulge myself with a little shopping and a cup of tea at the cafe. A familiar face greeted me, someone who brought back memories of past interactions at our home. It was Bruce, a young employee from the real estate company Terry frequently consulted. Terry had mentioned before that Bruce was relatively new to the company, having been there less than a year. Ah, yes, I remember you. You visited our house before, right? I recalled. Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced that time and even joining for a meal, Bruce replied, seeming genuinely apologetic. There's no need to worry. I should have been more welcoming, I responded, reflecting on the past interaction. We ended up sharing tea together. Bruce was affable, and despite his youth, seemed more level-headed than Terry. As we chatted, we discovered some common ground, and our conversation flowed easily. Eventually, we bid each other farewell, each going our separate ways, but feeling a bit more connected than before. I never imagined that a simple meeting for tea could later be misconstrued into a devastating accusation of infidelity. Yet that's exactly what happened when Terry confronted me upon his return. You've been cheating on me while I was away, haven't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave immediately, Terry declared abruptly. His words struck me like a force, blindsiding me at a moment when I was least prepared. I stood there reeling as I considered whether the rumors I had heard were true. Rumors that Terry had been spreading lies, crafting a narrative of my supposed infidelity to rationalize his desire for a divorce. The supposed other man in this fabricated story was Bruce, the very person Terry had accused me of having an affair with. Bruce showed up at my doorstep the day after our innocuous tea meeting. I apologize for the unexpected visit yesterday. Terry asked me to reach out to you, Bruce admitted as he stood in my doorway. Confused but curious, I invited him in, eager to understand the full story. What Bruce revealed next left me utterly stunned. Terry had concocted a plan to frame me for infidelity as part of his strategy to secure a divorce. Bruce was unwillingly pulled into this scheme, tasked with fabricating evidence to support Terry's plot. Terry's deceit was driven by two primary motives. First, he was anxious about losing his parents' home due to their financial troubles and viewed living with his parents as an easy out. My resistance to this idea had pushed him to concoct a scheme to oust me and claim the house for himself. Secondly, Terry had been carrying on an affair of his own. He spent many weekends with his mistress under the guise of discussing issues with my parents-in-law. His growing infatuation with her had led him to see me, his wife, as an obstacle. By framing me for infidelity, he aimed to remove me from the picture and secure the house for his ends. Despite my initial belief that Terry lacked shrewdness, the complexity and maliciousness of his scheme were shockingly devious. As I expressed my disgust, Bruce apologized for his part in the plot. However, I had no intention of letting Terry succeed with his deceitful plans. I pretended to cooperate while secretly strategizing a countermove. With Bruce's insights into real estate, he suggested several tactics. Ultimately, he proposed a bold plan: sell the house while Terry was away. When Terry returned and was stunned by the news of the sale, I was ready with my confrontation. I know everything, Terry. Bruce recorded all your schemes, including your attempts to frame me for cheating with him. If we go through with this divorce, I can seek alimony and take you to court, I declared, savoring the shock on his face. Why, he stammered, bewildered. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more revelation. You might not have realized, but Bruce isn't just any new employee. He's the son of the company's CEO. I pointed out, astonished at Terry's ignorance. Didn't you notice Bruce shares the same last name as the CEO? How did that escape your notice? My frustration was palpable. Terry tried to brush it off. Well, Bruce's last name isn't exactly uncommon. Are you serious right now? I couldn't believe his lack of awareness. Yes, I'm serious, Terry replied, his astonishment clear. It slowly dawned on him that Bruce's involvement meant his company, a crucial client that handled much of his family's real estate dealings, was now intimately aware of his deceit. If this news reached the CEO, Terry would be in serious trouble indeed. Bruce had likely already informed his father of the entire situation. Look, fine, Terry began as he realized the precariousness of his position. I'll check it out, but if you're lying, I'll figure it out, Terry said, his voice strained before abruptly hanging up. He soon realized the full impact of his schemes when the real estate company owned by Bruce's father decided to cut all business ties with him, refusing any further dealings or advice on his family property. With the sale of my house already finalized, Terry had no choice but to return to his family home after his business trip. Fortunately, Bruce had helped me find an affordable apartment, easing my transition as I began the divorce proceedings. Despite this, Terry continued to reach out, his voice desperate over the phone. I'm sorry, Megan. Please forgive me, he pleaded. It's too late for apologies, I replied firmly. You tried to manipulate me by using someone else. Why should I believe anything you say now? Don't say that. After our divorce, you can be with that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? He retorted, trying to shift the blame. Yeah, she had someone else she liked and dumped me. What a sorry tale. But just because of that, don't expect me to change my mind and come running back to you, I muttered, ending the call with a heavy sigh. Despite my efforts to keep my new address from him, Terry's calls were incessant. Each time he pleaded, "Please don't leave me. I'll change. I'll be a better husband." But I was tired of his empty promises. Once the divorce was finalized, I planned to delete his number, block him on WhatsApp, and cut off all contact completely. To complicate matters, even my mother-in-law reached out, her voice pleading, "Please, Megan, we'd be lost without you. It's not just about the house, right?" "But there's no house left," I reminded her sharply. "We're not that heartless." "Come back and you'll understand," she implored. "You wanted the money, didn't you?" I shot back, my frustration evident. "That's not true. You're being unfair. You tried to coerce me into living with you." She tried to reason, but I was beyond listening. Their motives had been clear, and I was determined not to fall back into their manipulative grasp. When I declined to comply, Terry turned to deception to gain an advantage during our divorce proceedings. I simply cannot place my trust in someone who employs such underhanded methods. I made my stance clear, pointing out his obvious financial motivations. Despite my firm rejections, the requests kept coming. Then my father-in-law intervened, his voice full of condescension, questioning whether I was neglecting my responsibilities as a daughter-in-law by not helping his wife more. He couldn't believe I would refuse, attributing my stance to personal debts I had supposedly accrued. I stood my ground, and in response, he raised his voice so much it was painful to listen. He accused me of being cruel, neglecting my mother-in-law during her time of need, and unfairly blaming her for my issues. He threatened to make me regret my decisions, calling me a wicked woman. After ending that distressing call, still resolute, I saved the audio recording and discussed it with my lawyer. It turned out that my father-in-law's aggressive words were legally considered threats. With this recorded proof, I warned Terry that I was prepared to take legal action unless he agreed to the divorce terms. Faced with no other options, he finally agreed, albeit reluctantly. This marked my liberation from the oppressive grasp of his family. Following the divorce, Terry's professional reputation took a hit. His colleagues' trust waned, and he faced diminished responsibilities at work. Financial strains forced him to sell his family home at a significantly lower price. Now he lives in a small apartment with his parents, dealing with a reduced income and the pressure of supporting his family. Additionally, he is required to pay me alimony. It was Bruce, who remained in touch as a reliable confidant, who told me about Terry's struggles. I came into an opportunity to put the customer service abilities I had honed at a clothes store to use while looking into new job paths. Bruce, who had recently transferred to a real estate company's HR division, advised me to seek for a position requiring excellent communication abilities. I decided to take the job offer and join the real estate company after thinking it over and talking with Bruce about the possibility. Bruce and I grew closer throughout this period of change, and our relationship finally developed into something more. We made the decision to tie the knot after a year of courting, and I was now the spouse of someone who would eventually hold the position of president of the business. That Terry, who had falsely accused us of being unfaithful, would witness us fall in love and get married was a surprising turn of events. Now that my new family, including my in-laws, are behind me, I can't wait to start a wonderful future with Bruce. We hope to make a lot of joyful experiences with one another, supported and encouraged by everyone around us.
"Nora, I need you to promise me something," Eli whispered, his grip weak but insistent. I leaned closer, my heart racing. The hospital room's sterile smell faded as I focused on my husband's pale face. "Anything, my love." "What is it?" "Take care of the boys and don't let them lose themselves." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I squeezed his hand, forcing a smile. "Of course I will. But you'll be there too, Eli. We'll do it together." He shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. "We both know that's not true, Nora. Promise me." "I promise," I choked out, tears blurring my vision. Eli's eyes closed, his breathing shallow. The monitor's steady beep became a haunting rhythm, marking the precious seconds we had left. "My name is Nora," and this was the moment my world shattered. I stood there, numb, as doctors rushed in. Their voices faded to a dull roar as I watched them work on Eli. It had all happened so fast. The diagnosis, the rapid decline, and now, this. "Time of death, 3:47 p.m., a voice announced. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Dr. Patel, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Nora. We did everything we could." I nodded mechanically, unable to form words. My mind raced, thinking of our sons, Jasper and Caleb. How would I tell them? How could I possibly keep my promise to Eli when I felt so lost myself? As if summoned by my thoughts, the door burst open. Jasper strode in, his face a mask of anger and grief.
"Mom."
"What happened? Why didn't you call me sooner?" I reached for him, but he brushed past me to Eli's bedside. "Dad? Dad, come on, wake up." "Jasper," I said softly, touching his arm. "He's gone, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." He whirled on me, eyes blazing. "This is your fault. You should have made him go to the doctor sooner. You should have." "That's enough," a quiet voice interrupted. Caleb stood in the doorway, his artist's hands clenched at his sides. "This is a mom's fault, Jasper. You know that." Jasper's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. "I can't believe he's gone." I moved to comfort him, but Caleb beat me to it. He knelt beside his brother, one hand on Jasper's back. "I know, Jas. I can't either." Watching them, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could keep my promise to Eli after all. Maybe we could get through this together. But then Jasper looked up, his eyes hard. "What happens now? With the house, the money, everything?" And just like that, the moment shattered. I stared at my eldest son, shocked by his questions so soon after his father's death. "Jasper, that's not important right now. We need to." "Not important," he scoffed. "Dad worked his whole life for us. We deserve to know what he left behind." Caleb stood up, disgust evident on his face. "Are you serious right now? Dad just died, and you're worried about money?" Jasper rose to face his brother. "Someone has to think practically. We can't all be starving artists like you, Caleb." "Stop it, both of you," I said firmly, stepping between them. "This isn't the time or place. We need to support each other, not fight." But as I looked at their faces, Jasper's calculating, Caleb's hurt, I realized this was just the beginning. Eli's last words echoed in my mind. Don't let them lose themselves. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We'll discuss everything later. For now, let's focus on saying goodbye to your father. As we gathered around Eli's bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family was balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. I placed my hand on Eli's still chest, my wedding ring glinting under the harsh hospital lights. "I'll keep my promise," I whispered, "no matter what it takes." Little did I know just how much that promise would cost me in the days to come. As we left the hospital, the weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. I was a widow, a mother, and now the keeper of secrets that could tear our family apart. But I was also a fighter, and I would do whatever it took to honor Eli's last wish and keep our family together, even if it meant facing the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. The tension in the room was palpable as I unfolded the crisp legal document. Jasper's eyes bored into me, his jaw clenched. Caleb sat quietly, his gaze darting between his brother and me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'll read the key points of your father's will," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "The family home and the majority of our savings are left to me, to manage as I see fit." Jasper's fist clenched on the armrest. I continued before he could interrupt. "For you boys, there's a modest trust fund. It's designed to help with education or starting a business, but it's not substantial. That's it. Jasper exploded, leaping to his feet. After everything Dad built, that's all we get? I met his gaze, unflinching. Your father worked hard to provide for us, Jasper. He wanted to ensure we'd be taken care of, but also that you'd make your own way in the world. Caleb spoke up, his voice soft. It makes sense, Jazz. Mom needs security, and we're young. We can build our own lives. Jasper rounded on his brother. Of course you'd say that. You don't care about money, mister. Starving artist. Some of us have ambition. Ambition. Caleb's eyes flashed. Is that what you call wanting a handout? Enough, I interjected, stepping between them. This is exactly what your father wanted to avoid. He believed in both of you, in your abilities to succeed on your own merits. Jasper scoffed.
Right.
So he leaves everything to you, and we get scraps. How is that fair? I felt my patience wearing thin. Life isn't always fair, Jasper. Your father trusted me to make the right decisions for this family. If you need help, I'm here. But I won't simply hand over a fortune you haven't earned. You're unbelievable, Jasper spat. Dad's barely cold, and you're already playing the stern matriarch. I bet you influenced him to write the will this way. The accusation stung, but I held my ground. That's enough. Your father made his own decisions. I'm honoring his wishes, whether you like it or not. Caleb stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. Mom's right, Jazz. This isn't helping anyone. We should be grateful for what we have, not fighting over money. Jasper's laugh was bitter. Oh, spare me the saintly act, Caleb. You're just happy because you know Mom will keep funding your little art projects. Some of us have real goals. I watched the hurt flash across Caleb's face and felt my anger rising. That's unfair, Jasper. Your brother's work is valuable, even if it's not measured in dollars. Your father was proud of both of you for different reasons. Well, he had a funny way of showing it, Jasper muttered. He paced the room, running a hand through his hair. What am I supposed to tell Savannah? We had plans, big plans. I sighed, remembering Eli's warnings about Jasper's girlfriend. Your relationship isn't dependent on your inheritance, Jasper. If Savannah truly loves you, he cut me off. Don't you dare lecture me about love. You have no idea what Savannah and I have. The room fell silent, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between us. I looked at my sons, Jasper, seething with resentment, and Caleb, a mix of sadness and resignation on his face. How had we come to this? Listen, I said softly, I know this is hard. We're all grieving, and emotions are running high. But we need to stick together. Your father wanted us to support each other, not tear ourselves apart over money. Jasper's shoulders slumped, some of the fight leaving him. I had plans, Mom. I thought I'd be able to start my own business, make Dad proud. I moved to him, placing a hand on his arm. You still can, sweetheart. The trust fund is there to help you get started. And I'm here to support you, always. But it has to be earned, not handed to you. He shrugged off my touch. Whatever. I need some air. Without another word, he stormed out of the room. Caleb and I stood in silence for a moment. He'll come around, Mom, Caleb said finally. He's just hurting. I nodded, hoping he was right. I know. I wish your father was here. He'd know what to say. Caleb hugged me, and I felt tears prick my eyes. You're doing great, Mom. Dad would be proud of how you're handling this. As we broke apart, I caught sight of Eli's photo on the mantel. His kind eyes seemed to bore into me, reminding me of his last words. Don't let them lose themselves. I hope you're right, Caleb, I whispered, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our troubles. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. This isn't over. Savannah and I won't stand for this. I showed it to Caleb, who shook his head. What are we going to do? I squared my shoulders, a plan already forming. Whatever it takes to keep this family together. Your father trusted me with that task, and I won't let him down. As Caleb left to start dinner, I sat heavily in Eli's old armchair. The weight of responsibility settled on me like a cloak. I had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but I knew one thing for certain. I would fight with everything I had to honor Eli's last wish and protect our family, even if it meant going to war with my own son. The doorbell chimed, its cheerful tone at odds with the tension that had settled over our home since the reading of Eli's will. I smoothed my shirt and took a deep breath before opening the door. "Mom, I want you to meet Savannah," Jasper said, his arm around a stunning blonde woman. Savannah's smile was dazzling, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, it's so lovely to finally meet you. Jasper's told me so much about you." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the warning bells ringing in my head. "Please call me Nora. Come in, both of you." As they entered, I couldn't help but notice Savannah's designer outfit and the way her eyes darted around our modest living room, assessing everything. Jasper seemed oblivious, his face alight with pride as he watched her. "Can I get you anything to drink?" I offered, leading them to the couch. "Just water for me," Savannah replied, her tone suggesting that anything else would be beneath her. "I'm on a very strict diet." I bit back a retort and headed to the kitchen, where Caleb was making coffee. "Is that her?" he whispered, peering around the doorframe. I nodded, filling a glass with water. "Be nice," I warned, "for Jasper's sake." When we returned to the living room, Savannah was examining the family photos on the mantel. "Oh, Jasper," she cooed, "you are such an adorable child. It's a shame you don't have any recent professional photos. They'd look so much more polished." I saw Caleb's jaw clench, but he managed a polite smile as he set down the coffee tray. "I like our family photos. They capture real moments." Savannah's laugh was like tinkling glass. "Oh, of course. But don't you think it's time for something a bit more sophisticated? Especially now that Jasper is about to start his own business." I raised an eyebrow at my son. "Oh, I didn't realize you had concrete plans, Jasper." He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I'm still working out the details. But Savannah's been really supportive and has some great connections." "That's right," Savannah chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. "My father knows some wonderful investors. Of course, they usually prefer to work with people who have substantial assets of their own." The implication hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. I felt my patience wearing thin. "Jasper has a trust fund," I said evenly. "It's meant to help him get started in life, including business ventures." Savannah's smile never wavered. "Oh, how quaint. But surely, as Eli's widow, you have access to more significant resources? I mean, Jasper is the eldest son. It's only natural that he'd want to continue his father's legacy in grand style." I saw Caleb tense beside me, ready to jump to my defense. But this was my battle to fight. "Eli's legacy," I said slowly, meeting Savannah's gaze, "was about more than money. It was about integrity, hard work, and family. Those are the values we cherish in this house." Savannah's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course. But surely you want Jasper to succeed? To have the best of everything." "What I want," I replied, my voice firm, "is for both my sons to find their own paths and build lives they can be proud of, not lives dictated by societal expectations or external pressures." The room fell silent. Jasper looked between Savannah and me, confusion and frustration warring on his face. "Mom," he started, but Savannah cut him off with a gentle touch on his arm. "It's all right, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false understanding. "I'm sure your mother will come around once she sees how successful you'll be. After all, what parent doesn't want the best for their child?" I felt my temper flare. "The best isn't always the most expensive or flashy, Savannah. Sometimes it's the hard-won victories and the lessons learned along the way." Savannah's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of contempt before her saccharine smile returned. "Well, we all have different definitions of success, I suppose. Jasper, sweetheart, we should go. We don't want to be late for our dinner reservation." As they stood to leave, I caught a glimpse of the person Jasper used to be, uncertain, looking to me for guidance. But then Savannah's hand slipped into his, and his expression hardened. "We'll talk later, Mom," he said, his tone clipped. After they left, Caleb and I sat in stunned silence. "Well," Caleb finally said, "that was a disaster," I finished, rubbing my temples. "She's trouble, Mom. Can't Jasper see that?" I sighed, thinking of Eli's warning. Love, or what we think is love, can blind us to a lot of things. But you're right. She's not here for Jasper. She's here for what she thinks he can provide. Caleb leaned forward, his expression serious. "What are we going to do?" I stood, walking to the window to watch Jasper's car disappear down the street. "We fight for him, Caleb. We fight to remind him of who he really is, not who Savannah wants him to be." As I turned back to my younger son, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Eli had trusted me to keep our family together, to prevent our boys from losing themselves. It wouldn't be easy, especially with Savannah's influence, but I was ready for the challenge. "We'll start by showing Jasper that true success isn't measured in dollar signs," I said, a plan already forming in my mind. "And we'll make sure Savannah understands that this family isn't her personal piggy bank." Caleb nodded, a determined glint in his eye. "I'm with you, Mom. All the way." As we began to strategize, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult battle. But with Eli's memory guiding me and Caleb by my side, I knew we stood a fighting chance. The war for Jasper's soul and our family's future had begun. The cafe bustled with the lunchtime crowd, but I barely noticed the noise. My eyes were fixed on the glittering diamond ring on Jasper's finger as he fidgeted nervously across the table. "Mom, We have some news," he began, glancing at Savannah, who beamed triumphantly beside him. My heart sank. I forced a smile, already dreading what was coming. "What is it, sweetheart?" Savannah thrust her left hand forward, a massive diamond catching the light. "We're engaged," she squealed, her voice carrying across the cafe. I swallowed hard, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "That's quite a surprise. Congratulations." Jasper's face fell slightly at my lukewarm response. "Aren't you happy for us, Mom?" Before I could answer, Savannah jumped in. "Of course she is, darling. She's just shocked by how quickly you swept me off my feet." She turned to me, her eyes glinting. "It was so romantic, Nora. Jasper proposed at the country club, with a string quartet and everything." I raised an eyebrow at my son. "The country club? I didn't realize you were a member." Jasper shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Savannah's family are members. They've been very generous." "I see," I said, my tone carefully measured. "And when did all this happen?" "Just last night," Savannah gushed. "We couldn't wait to tell you. And of course, to start planning the wedding. It's going to be the event of the season." I felt a headache coming on. "That sounds expensive." Jasper leaned forward, his expression earnest. "That's actually why we wanted to talk to you, Mom. We were hoping, well, with Dad's estate and everything, we'll need to access some of the funds," Savannah finished bluntly. "For the wedding, of course, and to help us get started. Jasper's business plans are so exciting, and with the right investment." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Slow down, please. Jasper, can we talk privately for a moment?" Savannah's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. I'll just powder my nose. Don't talk about me too much while I'm gone." She sashayed away, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. As soon as she was out of earshot, I leaned in close to Jasper. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "You've known her for barely 2 months." Jasper's jaw set stubbornly. "I love her, Mom. She understands me, supports my ambitions. Why can't you be happy for me?" "Because this isn't you, Jasper," I pleaded. "Lavish proposals? Country clubs? What happened to the son who wanted to build his business from the ground up, to make his own way?" "Maybe I've grown up," he snapped. "Maybe I've realized there's nothing wrong with wanting the finer things in life. Dad would have understood." The mention of Eli felt like a physical blow. Your father worked hard for everything he had. He didn't expect handouts or shortcuts. Jasper's eyes flashed. Is that what you think this is? A shortcut? I'm trying to secure our future, Mom. Savannah's connections could open doors for all of us. I shook my head, feeling the distance between us grow. And what does Savannah get out of this arrangement? What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm worried, Jasper. This is all happening so fast, and the way she talks about money. Stop. Jasper cut me off, his voice low and angry. I don't want to hear it. Savannah loves me for who I am, not what I have. But we do need your help to get started. It's my inheritance too, Mom. I have a right to it. Before I could respond, Savannah returned, sliding gracefully into her seat. Did I miss anything important? She asked, her tone innocent but her eyes sharp. Jasper took her hand, his expression hardening. Just filling Mom in on our plans. She's processing the news. Savannah's smile didn't waver. Of course, it's a lot to take in. But you'll help us, won't you, Nora? After all, family is everything. I looked between them, seeing the determination in Jasper's eyes and the calculation in Savannah's. In that moment, I made a decision. I'm sorry, I said firmly, but I can't give you access to the estate funds. The trusts are set up for specific purposes, and a lavish wedding isn't one of them. The silence that followed was deafening. Savannah's mask slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of fury before she composed herself. Jasper stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I can't believe this. You're really going to stand in the way of my happiness? Jasper, please. No, he cut me off. I've heard enough. Come on, Savannah. We're leaving. As they stormed out of the cafe, leaving me alone at the table, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Grief for the son I felt I was losing, anger at Savannah's manipulations, and a deep, gnawing fear that I was failing to keep my promise to Eli. But beneath it all, a steely resolve began to form. I wouldn't let Savannah destroy our family or lead Jasper astray. As I gathered my things to leave, I made a silent vow. I would fight for my son, for our family's legacy, and for the values Eli and I had always held dear. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for war. The annual Thompson family barbecue had always been a joyous occasion, but this year, tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. I stood at the grill, mechanically flipping burgers, my mind racing with worry about the inevitable confrontation looming. Caleb appeared at my side, his voice low. Mom, are you sure inviting Jasper and Savannah was a good idea? I sighed, wiping my brow. They're family, Caleb. We can't shut them out, no matter how difficult things have become. As if on cue, a sleek sports car pulled into the driveway. Jasper emerged, looking uncomfortable in an outfit far too formal for a backyard barbecue. Savannah stepped out behind him, her designer sundress and oversized sunglasses a stark contrast to the casual attire of our relatives. Showtime, Caleb muttered, squeezing my arm supportively before moving to greet them. I watched as Savannah air-kissed Caleb's cheeks, her eyes already scanning the gathering. Jasper hung back, his posture tense. When his gaze met mine, I saw a flicker of the son I knew, uncertain, almost apologetic. But then Savannah's hand slipped into his, and his expression hardened. The next hour passed in a haze of forced small talk and thinly veiled tension. I could feel Savannah's eyes on me, calculating her next move. It came as I was serving dessert. Nora, darling, Savannah's voice rang out, silencing the chatter around us. I've been meaning to ask, have you given any more thought to our little chat about the wedding funds? I froze, acutely aware of every eye turning towards us. Savannah, this isn't the time or place. Oh, but when is? She pressed, her tone sickeningly sweet. You've been avoiding us for weeks. I think the family deserves to know how you're holding Jasper back from his potential. Jasper shifted uncomfortably. Savannah, maybe we should. No, Jasper, she cut him off. Your mother needs to understand what she's doing. Do you all know, she addressed the gathering, that Nora is refusing to release funds that rightfully belong to Jasper? Funds that could help him start his business, secure our future. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I felt my cheeks burn with a mix of anger and embarrassment. That's not true, I said firmly. Jasper has access to his trust fund, which was set up specifically to help him get started in life. What he's asking for goes far beyond that. Savannah's eyes narrowed. And who are you to decide what he deserves? Eli would be ashamed of how you're treating his son. The mention of Eli's name was the final straw. I opened my mouth to retort, but Caleb beat me to it. That's enough, he said, his voice quiet but steely. You have no right to speak for our father, Savannah. You didn't know him. Savannah turned on him, her mask slipping to reveal the venom beneath. Oh, the artist speaks. Tell me, Caleb, how does it feel to mooch off your mother while your brother tries to make something of himself? Gasps echoed around the yard. Caleb stood his ground unflinching. I work hard for everything I have. And unlike some people, I don't measure success by the size of my bank account or the brand of my clothes. How dare you? Savannah shrieked. Jasper, are you going to let them talk to me like this? All eyes turned to Jasper, who looked torn between loyalty to Savannah and the family he'd known his whole life. I don't. Choose, Jasper, Savannah demanded. It's me or them, your future or your past. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son, my heart breaking as I saw the conflict play out across his face. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry, Mom, he said softly, but Savannah's right. You're holding me back. I can't keep living in Dad's shadow, trying to live up to your impossible standards. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, steadying myself against the picnic table. Jasper, please. But he was already turning away, Savannah's triumphant smile gleaming in the afternoon sun. We're leaving, she announced. And don't expect an invitation to the wedding. Clearly, you're not supportive of our happiness. As they stormed off, leaving a wake of shocked relatives behind them, I felt my world crumbling. Caleb's arm around my shoulders was the only thing keeping me upright. It's okay, Mom, he whispered. We'll figure this out. But as I watched Jasper's car disappear down the street, I wasn't so sure. Eli's last words echoed in my mind. Don't let them lose themselves. I'd failed him. I'd failed Jasper. As the stunned guests began to disperse, murmuring apologies and awkward goodbyes, I made a silent vow. This wasn't over. I wouldn't give up on Jasper, no matter what it took. Savannah may have won this battle, but the war for my son's soul was far from over. I turned to Caleb, my resolve strengthening. We need a plan, I said. And I think it's time we did some digging into Savannah's past. Something tells me there's more to her story than she's letting on. Caleb nodded, a determined glint in his eye. I'm with you, Mom. All the way. As we began to clean up the remnants of the disastrous barbecue, I felt a strange mix of despair and determination. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I would fight for my family with everything I had. Eli's legacy and Jasper's future depended on it. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands as I stared at the return address of the law firm. My heart raced as I tore it open, dreading what I might find inside. As I scanned the legal jargon, 2 words jumped out at me: contest and will. My worst fears were confirmed. Jasper and Savannah were taking legal action to challenge Eli's will. I sank into my chair, the room spinning. How had it come to this? My own son, willing to drag our family through a legal battle for money he hadn't earned. Mom, Caleb's voice snapped me back to reality. What's wrong? I handed him the letter wordlessly. His face darkened as he read. We need to confront them, he said, his voice tight with anger. This has gone too far. I nodded, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Call Jasper. Tell him we need to meet. All of us. An hour later, we sat in tense silence around the dining room table. Jasper refused to meet my eyes, while Savannah wore a smug smile that made my blood boil. I assume you know why we're here, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Savannah leaned forward, her eyes glinting. To finally see reason and give Jasper what he deserves? I ignored her, focusing on my son. Jasper, look at me. Is this really what you want? To tear our family apart over money. He shifted uncomfortably. It's not just about the money, Mom. It's about fairness. Dad would have wanted. Don't you dare presume to know what your father would have wanted. I cut him off, my voice sharp. Eli worked hard for everything we have. He believed in earning your way, not taking shortcuts. Savannah scoffed. Please. Eli was just too short-sighted to see Jasper's potential. Unlike you, we have ambition. Caleb slammed his hand on the table, making us all jump. Ambition? Is that what you call manipulating my brother and trying to steal from our family? How dare you? Savannah shrieked. Jasper, are you going to let them talk to me like this? But Jasper remained silent, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I took a deep breath, centering myself. Before this goes any further, there's something you both need to see. I pulled out a stack of documents I'd gathered over the past weeks. Bank statements, credit reports, and a detailed history of Savannah's past relationships and financial dealings. What is this? Jasper asked, his voice wary. The truth, I replied, spreading the papers across the table. About Savannah's past and her real motivations for being with you. Savannah's face paled as she recognized some of the documents. Where did you get those? That's private information. I met her gaze steadily. When you threaten my family, nothing is off limits. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate the woman trying to manipulate my son? Jasper leaned forward, his eyes scanning the papers. Mom, what are you talking about? Savannah has a history, Jasper. A pattern of attaching herself to wealthy men, draining their resources, and moving on to the next target. She's done it 3 times before you. The color drained from Jasper's face as he turned to Savannah. Is this true? She laughed nervously. Of course not, darling. Your mother is clearly desperate. She's making things up to turn you against me. But I could see the doubt creeping into Jasper's eyes. Then how do you explain these bank transfers? The maxed out credit cards in other men's names. Savannah's mask finally cracked. Her eyes narrowed as she hissed. You have no idea what I've been through. I deserve a good life, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it. The room fell silent as the weight of her admission sank in. Jasper stared at her, shock and betrayal written across his face. Jasper, I said softly, reaching for his hand. I know you thought you were in love, but this isn't love. It's manipulation. He pulled away, standing abruptly. I need some air. As he stormed out, Savannah turned on me, her face contorted with rage. You've ruined everything. I'll make you pay for this. Caleb stepped between us. I think it's time for you to leave, Savannah. For good. As she gathered her things, spewing threats and insults, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The battle was won, but at what cost? I found Jasper in the backyard, sitting on the old swing set where he and Caleb had played as children. He looked up as I approached, his eyes red-rimmed. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered. I've been such a fool. I sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. We all make mistakes, sweetheart. The important thing is learning from them. He nodded, leaning into me. I don't know how to fix this. I've hurt you, Caleb, our whole family. We'll figure it out together, I assured him. That's what family does. As we sat there, the weight of the past months finally lifting, I thought of Eli. I hoped, wherever he was, he could see that our family was finding its way back to each other. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But as I held my son, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger for it. The real work of healing our family was just beginning, but for the first time in months, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, we would honor Eli's memory and forge a new path forward, one built on love, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The coffee shop buzzed with mid-morning chatter, but I barely noticed as I stared at the file Miriam had just handed me. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the pages, each revelation more shocking than the last. I can't believe you found all this, I whispered, looking up at my friend's grim face. Miriam leaned forward, her voice low. It wasn't easy, Nora. Savannah's been careful, but she's left a trail. 3 wealthy families, 3 broken engagements, and a lot of missing money. I shook my head, still processing the information. How did we not see this sooner? She's good at what she does, Miriam replied. But everyone slips up eventually. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the house? I showed Miriam the message, a mix of hope and dread churning in my stomach. I guess I'm about to find out. As I pulled into the driveway of our family home, I saw Jasper's car already parked. My son stood on the porch, looking more like the boy I raised than the angry young man he'd become in recent months. Mom, he said as I approached, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. For everything. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his shoulders shake as he finally let go of the facade he'd been maintaining. It's okay, sweetheart. We're going to fix this. Inside, we sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared so many family meals. Jasper's eyes widened as I placed Miriam's file in front of him. What's this? He asked warily. The truth about Savannah, I replied gently. And it's worse than we thought. As Jasper read through the documents, his face cycled through a range of emotions, disbelief, anger, and finally, a deep sadness. I've been such a fool, he whispered, pushing the file away. How could I not see it? I reached across the table, taking his hand. Love can blind us, Jasper. But it's not too late to make things right. He nodded, squeezing my hand. What do we do now? Before I could answer, the front door burst open. Savannah stormed in, her face a mask of fury. What is this? She shrieked, waving a piece of paper. A restraining order? You think you can just throw me away like trash? Jasper stood, placing himself between Savannah and me. It's over, Savannah. I know everything. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You don't know anything. You're nothing without me, Jasper. A pathetic mama's boy who can't stand on his own 2 feet. I watched my son's back stiffen, but his voice remained calm. That's where you're wrong. I'm a Thompson. We don't need to steal or manipulate to succeed. We work hard and earn our place in the world. Savannah's eyes narrowed as she turned to me. This is your doing, isn't it? You've poisoned him against me. No, Savannah, I said, standing to join Jasper. You did that all on your own. Her composure cracked, desperation seeping through. You can't do this to me. I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone how you mistreated me, how you tried to keep Jasper from his inheritance. Go ahead, Jasper replied. But first, you might want to take a look at this. He slid Miriam's file across the table. Savannah's face paled as she flipped through the pages. How? Where did you get this? She stammered. It doesn't matter, I said firmly. What matters is that it's over. You're going to leave my family alone, or we'll make sure every wealthy family in the state knows exactly who you are and what you've done. Savannah's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the scared, desperate woman behind the manipulative facade. You don't understand, she whispered. I had nothing. I was nobody. I just wanted a chance at a better life. Jasper's voice was gentle but firm. There are better ways, Savannah. Honest ways. I hope you find them, but it won't be with us. As Caleb escorted a defeated Savannah out, Jasper turned to me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I don't know how to thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I pulled him close, feeling the weight of the past months finally lifting. That's what family does, sweetheart. We fight for each other, no matter what. As we stood there, I thought of Eli. I could almost feel his presence, his approval warming the room. We had weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and kept our promise to him. What now? Jasper asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I smiled, a plan already forming. Now we rebuild. Together. As a family. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But as I held my son, surrounded by the memories of our family's love and strength, I knew we would face whatever challenges came our way. Eli's last words echoed in my mind. don't let them lose themselves. We had come close, but in the end, we had found our way back to who we truly were. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The gallery buzzed with excitement, a sea of well-dressed patrons admiring the vibrant canvases that adorned the walls. I stood in the center of it all, my heart swelling with pride as I watched Caleb confidently discuss his work with an influential art critic. "He's really made it, hasn't he?" Jasper's voice came from beside me, a hint of awe in his tone. I turned to my eldest son, noting the genuine happiness in his eyes.
"He has."
"And so have you, in your own way." Jasper nodded, his gaze drifting to the small business cards he held, advertising his new ethical investment firm. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad things turned out the way they did, even the hard parts. I squeezed his arm, remembering the tumultuous journey that had brought us here. "Your father would be so proud of both of you." As if summoned by our conversation, Caleb joined us, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, Jazz, you won't believe it. The Guggenheim wants to feature my work in their next exhibition." Jasper pulled his brother into a bear hug, their laughter drawing smiles from nearby guests. "I always knew you had it in you, little bro." As I watched my son celebrate, I felt a presence beside me. Miriam handed me a glass of champagne, her eyes twinkling. "You did it, Nora. You kept your promise to Eli." I took a sip, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue. "We did it together. I couldn't have gotten through this without you, Miriam." She waved off my gratitude. "That's what friends are for." "Now, are you ready for the surprise?" Before I could ask what she meant, Caleb clinked his glass, calling for attention. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please. There's someone very special I'd like to honor tonight." The crowd hushed as Caleb gestured for me to join him. Confused, I made my way to his side. "This woman," Caleb began, his voice thick with emotion, "is not just my mother. She's the backbone of our family, the one who held us together when we were falling apart. Mom, this is for you." He pulled a cloth off a nearby easel, revealing a stunning portrait. I gasped, recognizing myself and Eli, painted in Caleb's distinctive style. We were seated on our old porch swing, surrounded by swirls of color that seemed to pulse with life and love. "It's called Legacy of Love," Caleb explained, "because that's what you and Dad gave us. A foundation of love that could weather any storm." Tears blurred my vision as Jasper joined us, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "We owe you everything, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on us." The gallery erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. In that moment, I was transported back to Eli's hospital room, hearing his final request: "Take care of the boys, and don't let them lose themselves." As I hugged my sons, I knew I had fulfilled that promise. We had all lost our way for a time, but in the end, we had found our way back to each other and to the values that truly mattered. Later that night, as the last guests trickled out, I found myself alone in front of Caleb's portrait. I traced the lines of Eli's face, remembering the warmth of his smile, the strength of his embrace. "We did it, my love," I whispered. "Our boys are going to be just fine." A gentle breeze rustled through the gallery, carrying with it the scent of Eli's favorite aftershave. For a moment, I could almost feel his presence, his approval warming me from within. Jasper and Caleb appeared on either side of me, each taking one of my hands. "What do you say we head home?" Jasper suggested. "I think this calls for a family dinner. Maybe we could make Dad's famous lasagna?" Caleb grinned. "Only if Mom promises not to burn the garlic bread this time." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years.
"Deal.
But you're both on dish duty." As we left the gallery, arm in arm, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. We had weathered the storm of grief, greed, and betrayal, and emerged stronger for it. Eli's legacy lived on, not in material possessions or grand gestures, but in the love that bound us together. In the end, that was the greatest inheritance he could have left us. The cool night air kissed my cheeks as we walked to the car, the stars twinkling overhead. I looked at my sons, Jasper, once lost but now found, his ambition tempered by wisdom, and Caleb, his talent finally recognized. his compassion a beacon for us all. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. We had come full circle, from the depths of loss to the heights of redemption. And though the road had been hard, I wouldn't have changed a single step. As we drove home, the city lights blurring into a tapestry of possibility, I silently renewed my vow to Eli. I would continue to nurture the legacy of love we had built together, guiding our family toward a future bright with promise and rich with the values we held dear. The journey wasn't over. It never truly would be. But with the strength of our bond and the lessons we'd learned, I knew that whatever life threw our way, we would face it as we always had, together, as a family. And in that knowledge, I found a joy so pure, so complete, that it filled every corner of my being. This, I realized, was the true meaning of Eli's last wish. Not just to keep the boys from losing themselves, but to help us all find our way back to what really mattered. As we pulled into our driveway, the porch light a welcoming beacon, I smiled. We were home, in every sense of the word. And the best was yet to come.
I laid in bed, restless, my mind racing with the conversation from earlier that evening. Aaron's words echoed in my head. "Your family, Beth. Just let us build on Grandpa's land. We deserve it too." How could he say that? That land was sacred, meant for Grandpa's dream project, a community center where he could share his passion for woodworking with the neighborhood kids. It was his dying wish, and I intended to honor it. Aaron always had a way of making me feel guilty, like I owed him something. But this time it felt different, like he was taking advantage of our familial bond for his own selfish gain. I tossed and turned, replaying the scenario. What? That land was meant for Grandpa's dream project. I had protested, my voice trembling with disbelief. Aaron's words cut deep. "Come on, sis. We're not asking for much, just a small piece of that vast property. You know you can't handle all of it alone." Alone. The word stung. It had been 3 years since my husband passed, leaving me to manage Grandpa's carpentry business single-handedly. But I wasn't helpless, and I certainly didn't need Aaron's pity or his demands. Still, the nagging guilt persisted. Aaron was family, after all, and he had a point. The land was vast, and maintaining it was a constant struggle. Perhaps I could compromise, allocate a small portion for him to build on, while preserving the rest for Grandpa's vision. With a heavy sigh, I made my decision. I would hear Aaron out, but on my terms. Grandpa's dream would not be compromised, no matter what. A few days later, Aaron's wife, Ally, showed up at my doorstep, clutching a thick folder adorned with an architectural firm's logo. She barged in without so much as a greeting, her expression stern and unyielding. "Here are the blueprints," she announced, slamming the folder onto the kitchen table. "As you can see, we have everything planned out in meticulous detail." I opened the folder, my eyes widening at the elaborate designs. An entire mansion? But I thought we agreed on a modest house. Ally scoffed, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arching in disdain. "Don't be ridiculous, Beth. We deserve a home that matches our status and success. This is non-negotiable." My throat tightened as I flipped through the pages, each one more extravagant than the last. Grand foyers, multiple wings, even a private theater. It was excessive, to say the least. "But what about Grandpa's dream project?" I protested weakly. "We can't just pave over the entire property for your palace." Ally's piercing gaze bore into me, her lips curling into a condescending smirk. "Oh, please, that silly little community center? It's time to let go of the past and embrace the future, Beth. Our future." Her words stung like a slap across the face. How dare she dismiss Grandpa's lifelong dream so callously? The very dream that had sustained his spirit through countless hardships. The dream he had entrusted to me on his deathbed. I opened my mouth to argue, but Ally held up a perfectly manicured hand, effectively silencing me. "Save your breath. This is happening, whether you like it or not. We'll be expecting the funds for construction within the month." With that, she turned on her heel and strode out, leaving me to stare helplessly at the blueprints that threatened to consume everything Grandpa had worked so hard for. My hands trembled with a mixture of rage and despair. How could they be so heartless, so utterly devoid of respect for the man who had taken me in and raised me as his own? Didn't our shared history mean anything to them? I slumped into a chair, the weight of their demands crushing me. It seemed that no matter how hard I fought, they would always find a way to strip me of my dignity, to trample over the legacy that meant everything to me. But as the initial shock subsided, a familiar fire began to burn within me, the same fire that had fueled Grandpa's determination in the face of adversity. I would not let them win, not without a fight. It was time to take a stand, to protect the dream that had shaped my very existence. With renewed resolve, I gathered the blueprints and began formulating a plan. If Aaron and Ally wanted a battle, they would get one, and this time I intended to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The next morning I found myself at the hospital, visiting my ailing father John. As I approached his room, I overheard Ally's shrill voice echoing in the hallway. "It's just so awful, isn't it? But until he's gone, we can't get what's truly ours." My heart sank as the meaning of her words registered. She was talking about Dad's inheritance. My inheritance, the one tied to Grandpa's land and his dream project. I peered around the corner, and there she was, phone pressed to her ear, oblivious to my presence. Her face was twisted into an expression of pure disgust, as if the very thought of my father's existence repulsed her. I know," she continued, her voice dripping with impatience. "But the sooner he kicks the bucket, the sooner we can finally live the life we deserve. No more scraping by, no more sacrifices." My hands balled into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. How could she be so callous, so utterly devoid of human decency? This was her own father-in-law she was talking about, a man who had welcomed her into our family with open arms. Bile rose in my throat as the full weight of her words hit me. She wasn't just after Grandpa's land, she was after everything, every last penny of our inheritance, and she was willing to wish death upon my father to get it. In that moment, something shifted within me. The anger, the resentment, the overwhelming sense of injustice, it all crystallized into a single, unwavering purpose. I would not stand idly by while these vultures picked our family legacy apart, piece by piece. Ally finally noticed me standing there, her eyes widening in surprise. "Beth, I didn't see you there." "Save it," I spat, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "I heard everything." Her face paled, but she quickly regained her composure, her lips curling into a sickly sweet smile. "Oh, you know how it is with family matters. Things get said in the heat of the moment, but we don't really mean them." "Don't insult my intelligence," I growled, taking a step towards her. "I know exactly what you and Aaron are up to, and I won't let you get away with it." For a brief moment, her mask slipped, revealing the true ugliness beneath. Her eyes narrowed, her mouth twisting into a sneer. "You can't stop us, Beth," she hissed. "We're going to take what's rightfully ours, whether you like it or not, and there's nothing you can do about it." With that, she brushed past me, her shoulder colliding with mine in a deliberate show of dominance. But I barely registered the physical contact, my mind already whirring with determination. This was war, plain and simple, and as I stepped into my father's room, my resolve hardened. I would protect our family, our legacy at all costs, no matter what it took. A few days later, Aaron and Ally showed up at my doorstep once again, this time with a smug look on their faces that immediately set me on edge. "We've done the math," Aaron announced without preamble, "and to cover the construction costs, we'll need you to fork over $150,000. I stared at him in disbelief, certain I had misheard. $150,000? For a single house? Allie rolled her eyes, as if I were a petulant child questioning the obvious. Don't be dense, Beth. This is a mansion we're talking about, not some run-of-the-mill hovel. The materials alone are going to cost an arm and a leg. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the outrageous figure. Even if I liquidated every asset and drained my savings, I'd barely scratch the surface of that amount. That's an unreasonable demand, I protested weakly, already sensing the futility of my words. Aaron's expression hardened, his eyes glinting with barely concealed contempt. Don't give us that crap, sis. We both know you've got Grandpa's inheritance money stashed away somewhere. You owe us at least that much for agreeing to this whole thing. Ally nodded vigorously, her perfectly coiffed hair bouncing with each emphatic bob of her head. Exactly. It's time to stop being so damn selfish and start sharing the wealth, Beth. We're family, after all. The word family felt like a slap in the face, twisted and perverted beyond recognition by their insatiable greed. How could they claim to care about familial bonds when they were so willing to trample over everything our grandfather had held dear? I need some time to think this over, I stammered, my mind reeling from their audacity. Aaron shrugged, already turning to leave. Fine, take your time, but we expect that money in full by the end of the month, no excuses. As they walked away, I couldn't help but feel like I was being backed into a corner, forced to choose between preserving my grandfather's legacy and appeasing the insatiable appetites of these two vultures. But deep down, I knew there had to be more to their story, some hidden agenda or ulterior motive driving their outrageous demands. They were playing a game, and I was determined to figure out the rules before it was too late. With trembling fingers, I transferred a lump sum of $20,000 into their account, a token gesture to buy myself some time. Then I made a call to an old friend of my grandfather's, a private investigator who owed him a favor. I need you to dig into Aaron and Ally's finances, I said, my voice steady and resolved. There's something they're not telling me, and I intend to find out what it is. This was just the beginning, I knew, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that I might be able to turn the tables and reclaim what was rightfully mine, and honor my grandfather's memory in the process. A week later, the private investigator I'd hired called me with some startling news about Aaron and Ally's finances. Well, it's not looking good for them, he said without preamble. Their business is deep in the red, and they've been defaulting on loan payments left and right. My heart sank as the pieces began to fall into place. So that's why they were demanding so much money from me. Exactly, he confirmed. And get this, they recently booked an extravagant vacation to the Bahamas, blowing through what little savings they had left. White-hot fury coursed through my veins as the full extent of their betrayal became clear. They had no intention of using my inheritance to build their dream home. They were simply trying to dig themselves out of a financial hole of their own making, all while living it up on a lavish tropical getaway. Those lying, manipulative snakes. I seethed, my hands balling into fists. They were playing me this whole time, trying to bleed me dry for their own selfish gains. The investigator let out a low whistle. You got that right. And from the looks of it, they were planning to skip town after draining your accounts, leaving you high and dry. A sudden thought occurred to me, and I felt a rush of determination unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Not if I have anything to say about it. Without another word, I hung up the phone and immediately called my old friend Ron, a seasoned lawyer who had worked closely with my grandfather over the years. Ron, I need your help, I said, laying out the entire sordid tale of Aaron and Ally's deceit. They've been trying to swindle me out of my inheritance, and I want to make sure they pay for what they've done. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Ron spoke, his voice laced with grim resolve. Say no more, Beth. We're going to make sure those two get what's coming to them, and protect your grandfather's legacy in the process. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly, poring over legal documents and crafting an ironclad plan. By the time Aaron and Ally returned from their ill-gotten vacation, everything was in place. Their smug grins quickly faded when they saw the construction crews hard at work on the property, but not on the palatial mansion they had envisioned. What the hell is this? Aaron demanded, his face flushing with rage as he stormed over to where I stood, arms crossed defiantly. This is your dream home, brother dear, I replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from creeping into my voice. A brand new community center, just like Grandpa always wanted. As realization dawned on their faces, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. The tables had finally turned, and this time I was the one holding all the cards. Aaron's face turned a deep shade of crimson as he lunged towards me, his hands balled into tight fists. What the hell is this? This isn't what we agreed upon. I stood my ground, unflinching in the face of his rage. On the contrary, brother dear, this is exactly what we agreed upon, or rather, what I agreed to. Ron stepped forward, brandishing a thick stack of documents. The final signed contract is for the construction of a community center on this property. Beth owns the land outright, and she has every legal right to proceed with her grandfather's vision. Ally's shrill voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You can't do this. We had a deal." "A deal?" I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. "You mean the deal where you tried to swindle me out of my inheritance to fund your lavish lifestyle? The one where you wished for our own father's death just so you could get your grubby hands on his money?" Their faces drained of color as the truth hung in the air, laid bare for all to see. In that moment, they looked small, pathetic, the facade of their supposed success crumbling around them. "How did you?" Ally stammered, her voice trembling with fear. "I have my ways," I replied coolly, "and thanks to your little confession at the hospital, I have all the evidence I need to make sure you never see a single penny of our family's money." Aaron's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a snarl. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against ours." With a flick of my wrist, I produced my phone and hit play, Ally's damning words filling the air like a noxious cloud. "It's awful, isn't it? But until he's gone, we can't get what's truly ours." Silence hung thick in the air as the recording ended, the weight of their betrayal crushing down upon them. Aaron's shoulders slumped in defeat, while Ally buried her face in her hands, her perfectly manicured nails doing little to hide her shame. "You're ruined," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Both of you. Your greed has cost you everything." As if on cue, a sleek black sedan pulled up, and two imposing figures emerged. Aaron's boss and a representative from the loan company they were in debt to. "Aaron Carter," the boss bellowed, his face twisted in disgust. "I've just been made aware of your extracurricular activities. Consider yourself fired, effective immediately." The loan representative stepped forward, brandishing a stack of papers. "And as for you, Mrs. Carter, we'll be initiating foreclosure proceedings on your home and assets to recoup the outstanding debts. You're both officially bankrupt." As they were led away, defeated and humiliated, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet triumph. They had brought this upon themselves, allowing their greed and selfishness to consume them until there was nothing left. And as for me, I had preserved my grandfather's legacy, ensuring that his dream would live on long after those who sought to destroy it were nothing but a distant memory. In the aftermath of Aaron and Ally's public humiliation, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm had passed, and I had emerged victorious, but at what cost? As I sat alone in the silence of my grandfather's woodshop, running my fingers over the smooth, worn surface of his workbench, I couldn't help but wonder if he would have approved of the lengths I'd gone to protect his dream. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie, and I turned to see Ron standing in the doorway, a somber expression on his face. "Beth," he said, stepping inside, "I know this hasn't been easy for you, but I think you did the right thing." I let out a weary sigh, my shoulders slumping under the weight of my conflicted emotions. "Did I, though? I mean, I practically destroyed my own brother's life. What kind of person does that make me?" Ron's brow furrowed as he considered my words. "A person who was willing to do whatever it took to preserve her family's legacy," he said finally. "Aaron and Ally brought this upon themselves with their greed and deceit. You simply leveled the playing field." His words rang true, but still, a part of me couldn't shake the nagging sense of guilt. These were people I had once loved and trusted, after all, family. As if sensing my inner turmoil, Ron reached into his briefcase and produced a small recording device. "I think you should hear this," he said, pressing play. Ally's voice filled the room, her tone dripping with disdain as she spat the words I had overheard at the hospital. "It's awful, isn't it? But until he's gone, we can't get what's truly ours." I flinched, the memory of those words still fresh and raw, like a jagged shard of glass piercing my heart. But then Ron rewound the tape and played it again, this time with the full context. "And that's why we need to sort out this mess with Beth before Dad passes away. It's awful, isn't it? But until he's gone, we can't get what's truly ours, a chance to make things right and honor Grandpa's legacy." My breath caught in my throat as the true meaning of her words sank in. They hadn't been wishing for our father's death at all. They had been lamenting the fact that they wouldn't be able to make amends until after he was gone. Tears stung my eyes as the weight of my mistake came crashing down upon me. I had let my anger and suspicion blind me to the truth, lashing out in a misguided quest for vengeance. "Oh, Ron," I whispered, my voice thick with remorse. What have I done? But even as the guilt threatened to consume me, a glimmer of hope shone through. Aaron and Ally's lives might have been shattered, but they were still alive, and there was still a chance, however slim, to make things right. With renewed determination, I turned to Ron, my jaw set in a firm line. We need to find them, I said, my voice steady and resolute, and we need to make this right, no matter what it takes. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I had a sense of purpose, not just to preserve my grandfather's legacy, but to heal the deep wounds I had inflicted upon my own family. It was time to find redemption, one painful step at a time. It took months of searching, but eventually, Ron and I managed to track down Aaron and Ally. They had hit rock bottom, living out of a dilapidated motel, scraping by on menial jobs just to put food on the table. When I first laid eyes on them, huddled together in that dingy room, it was as if the weight of the world had come crashing down upon their shoulders. Aaron, once so full of swagger and bravado, now looked small and defeated, his eyes hollow and haunted. And Ally, who had always carried herself with such poise and confidence, was a mere shadow of her former self, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled and unkempt. For a moment I wavered, the old anger and resentment threatening to resurface, but then I remembered my purpose, redemption, healing, and the chance to make things right. Aaron, Ally, I said, my voice steady despite the tumult of emotions raging within me. We need to talk. They regarded me warily like cornered animals, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt at the fear and distrust etched onto their faces. What do you want from us? Aaron spat, his voice tinged with bitterness. Haven't you taken enough? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. I want to apologize, I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. I made a terrible mistake, and in my quest for vengeance I let my anger blind me to the truth. Ally's brow furrowed, confusion and skepticism warring across her features. What are you talking about? Slowly, I recounted the events that had led me down this path, the misinterpreted conversation, the assumption of their ill intent, and the devastating consequences that followed. As I spoke, their expressions shifted from guarded to stunned, the realization of my mistake dawning on them like a cruel twist of fate. Beth, Aaron breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. We never meant for any of this to happen. Tears stung my eyes as I nodded, the weight of my guilt threatening to crush me. I know, I said, my voice thick with emotion, and I am so sorry. In that moment something shifted between us. A wall built upon years of resentment and mistrust began to crumble. Ally reached out, her hand trembling, and took mine in a gesture of tentative forgiveness. We were all blinded by our own desires, she said, her voice tinged with regret, but that doesn't excuse what we put you through. And just like that, the floodgates opened, and we poured out our hearts to one another, laying bare the pain and misunderstandings that had festered for far too long. It was a cathartic release, a cleansing of the soul that left us all drained but oddly at peace. As the sun began to set outside the grimy motel window, casting long shadows across the room, I knew that our journey was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more wounds to heal, and more bridges to mend. But in that moment, surrounded by the love and forgiveness of my family, I felt a sense of contentment that I hadn't experienced in years. Grandpa's dream had been realized, his legacy preserved, and now with Aaron and Ally by my side, the future looked brighter than ever. We're going to get through this, I said, my voice ringing with conviction. Together. And as we embraced, a newfound bond forged in the fires of our shared tribulations, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them as a united front, a family, whole and unbroken, standing tall in the face of adversity. For in that moment, I had found something far more precious than any inheritance or material possession, the true meaning of redemption and the unshakable power of love to heal even the deepest of wounds.
As the Wilson family's second daughter, I had to live in Jessica's shadow growing up. Our parents said she was flawless in every aspect, and she was 5 years older. I was taught this lesson at a young age, and it was repeated every day in both significant and minor ways. I was thrilled to show my parents that I had gotten an A on my arithmetic test when I was 6 years old. They were admiring Jessica's new dancing move as they were in the kitchen. Mother remarked, "That's nice, honey," without even glancing at my paper. "But look at your sister's pirouette." I silently made my way to my room after standing there with my test till the paper became limp in my palms. The pattern remained constant. I got her hand-me-downs, while Jessica got new things from the mall. They got her the newest iPhone when she requested a phone at the age of 12. I was told to be thankful when I received Jessica's old flip phone on my 12th birthday. Dad used to say, "Your sister is going places," if I ventured to voice my displeasure. She needs these things for her future. It seems that I didn't need to invest much in my future. The same material was used to make our paternal grandparents, who had a swimming pool and a well-kept lawn in a posh area of town. Grandma Margaret always greeted Jessica with big hugs and enthusiastic squeals when we came, while I received a distracted pat on the head. She would exclaim, "Oh, Robin," as if she had just realized I was here. "You've grown." It was Christmas when I was 8 years old. Jessica opened a brand new laptop that she needed for her coursework. I received several pencils and a bag of notebooks. "We're being practical," Grandpa Richard said, grinning patronizingly. "This is more your speed, isn't it?" However, my mother's parents' home served as my own haven. On the opposite side of town, Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George occupied a little ranch-style house. Something wonderful occurred there. They treated me as if I were important. When I spoke, they would genuinely pay attention. They put my artwork next to Jessica's on their refrigerator. When I visited, they prepared my favorite dishes because they remembered them. Jessica detested going there. She would gripe, "It's so boring. They don't even have a pool, and Grandma Eleanor never lets me choose what we watch on TV." She thus stopped coming, so I had them all to myself. I spent my afternoons with Eleanor and George's, while our parents were occupied escorting Jessica to her never-ending schedule of events, which included violin lessons. She would stop after 3 weeks, ballet 1 month, and horseback riding the next. They helped me with my homework, showed me how to bake cookies, and never once made comparisons between me and my sister. My parents made the ultimate decision on my value to the family when I was 10 years old. Although it seemed more like a trial where the sentencing had been determined long before the proceedings started, it happened during what they termed a family meeting. It was an October Sunday afternoon. The 6 of us sat down in our living room, Jessica and I sitting on chairs we had brought in from the dining room, both sets of grandparents on the matching sofas, and Mom and Dad standing by the fireplace. The air was thick with artificial significance. Dad started off by saying, "We need to discuss something serious," with his hands clenched behind his back like a CEO announcing layoffs. "As you know, college education isn't getting any cheaper," Mom went on, her gaze straying to Jessica. "But with the current economy, we can only afford to send one of them to college." The subsequent delay was only for theatrical effect, similar to how TV. Shows create tension before revealing the clear winner, and it wasn't actually a pause at all. Dad said Jessica will be starting college in 3 years. She has demonstrated exceptional talent in a wide range of fields. We must encourage her to reach her full potential. Then he turned to me, his expression a mix of dismissal and fake sympathy. "Robin, honey, you're different. You're more suited for practical work. You don't really need college." Grandma Margaret, Dad's mother, nodded enthusiastically. "Jessica is so gifted," she gushed. Just last week, her dance teacher said she had natural grace. She needs the best education possible. I sat there feeling smaller with each word, not talented enough, not worth investing in, not special like Jessica. The familiar message, now just officially stamped and sealed. But then something unexpected happened. Grandpa George stood up, his face red with anger. "This is absolutely unfair," he declared. "How dare you write off a 10-year-old child like this?" "George, my father started, but Grandma Eleanor cut him off. If you won't support both your daughters equally," she said, her voice sharp as ice, "then we'll pay for Robin's college ourselves." I watched as my maternal grandparents stood up together, a united front. "Robin will have her chance at college," Grandma Eleanor announced. "We'll make sure of that." Then they walked out, leaving stunned silence behind. Later that night, I was heading to the kitchen for water when I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. The heating vent carried their words clearly up to the hallway. "Mom's being ridiculous," Mom was saying. "Robin's not college material. She can barely keep up in regular classes. They should give us that money for Jessica's education instead. It would be wasted on Robin. She's just not bright." Dad agreed. "I don't know why they're pushing this." I stood there in the dark hallway, their words washing over me like a familiar bit of rain. But somehow, it didn't hurt as much as it should have. Maybe because I'd heard it all before, or maybe because I could still hear Grandma Eleanor's fierce promise echoing in my head. The years passed, and Jessica went off to an expensive private college while I finished high school. My parents never missed a chance to brag about their perfect daughter, constantly updating everyone about Jessica's amazing college experience, her excellent grades, and her bright future ahead. I focused on my own studies, spending most of my time at Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George's house. Their quiet support meant more than all my parents' loud praise of Jessica ever could. Then came the day that shattered my parents' perfect vision of their golden child. I was in my senior year when Jessica came home from college, fresh from graduation. I was doing homework at the kitchen table when she burst through the front door, mascara running down her face. "Mom, Dad," she sobbed, "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom dropped her coffee mug, dark liquid spreading across the kitchen floor. "Who's the father?" Dad finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jessica's next words sent Mom collapsing into a chair. "I don't know for sure." I watched my parents' faces as their perfect world crumbled, but it took them less than 5 minutes to reconstruct it. "Oh, sweetie," Mom rushed to hug Jessica. "It's not your fault. These things happen. We'll help you raise the baby." Dad added quickly, "You can stay here with us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I said from my spot at the table. "She parties her way through college, gets pregnant, doesn't even know who the father is, and you're still making excuses for her." "Robin," Mom snapped. "No, listen." I continued, years of frustration finally boiling over. "This is what happens when you spoil someone their entire life, when you never make them face consequences. When you—" "How dare you?" Dad thundered. "Your sister is going through a difficult time, and you're being cruel." Jessica burst into fresh tears, and Mom wrapped her arms around her protectively. "Get out," she screamed at me. "You heartless little—" I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran upstairs, threw some clothes into a bag, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear them consoling Jessica, telling her everything would be okay, that none of this was her fault. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George took me in without question. I finished my senior year living with them, focusing on my college applications. My parents didn't call, didn't check on me, didn't even show up at my graduation. But I had my real family there, my grandparents, beaming with pride as I accepted my diploma that fall. I left for college in another city, my tuition paid by my grandparents, just as they'd promised years ago. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica had given birth to a daughter and was living with our parents. They were probably still making excuses for her, still treating her like their perfect child who could do no wrong. Life had a funny way of working out. My life after graduation. Jessica's brilliant future had crumbled. I was thriving after graduating college with honors. I landed a job at a top consulting firm in the city. Within 6 years, I had worked my way up to senior consultant, earned respect from my colleagues, and even managed to buy my own apartment. My routine was comfortable. Challenging work during the week, weekend brunches with friends, and regular video calls with Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George. They were proud of everything I'd accomplished, and that was all the family validation I needed. Then, on a regular Tuesday morning, my phone rang. I almost dropped my coffee when I saw Mom flash across the screen, a number I hadn't seen in almost a decade. Robin. Her voice sounded older, tired. "We need your help." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my office, still trying to process what she told me. Jessica had run away again. This time it was some guy she'd met at a bar. She'd left behind her 9-year-old daughter, the niece I'd never met. "Please come home," Mom had pleaded. "We need to discuss this in person." That's how I found myself driving back to my childhood home that evening. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling around the windows. Mom and Dad had aged more than I expected. Dad's hair completely gray now, Mom's face lined with worry. They led me to the living room, the same room where they'd once declared I wasn't worth sending to college. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Jessica's been unstable." Dad began, staring at his hands. "She never kept a job for more than a few months. Different men, different apartments. She always ended up back here." Mom wiped her eyes. "We tried to help, paid her debts, watched Lucy while she worked, or said she was working. But last week she met this man, said he was taking her to California to become an actress." She laughed bitterly. She packed a bag and left. Didn't even say goodbye to Lucy. "We're drowning in debt," Dad admitted, his voice cracking. "Credit cards, personal loans, all to keep Jessica afloat." And now, he waited for the rest, watching them squirm uncomfortably on the couch, which had faded from cream to dingy beige. "We want you to take Lucy," Mom finally said. "Adopt her. Actually, you're stable, successful. You could give her a good life. We're too old for this. We can't start over with a child." I sat there, stunned. These people who had written me off as worthless, who hadn't even come to my graduation, were now asking me to take responsibility for a child I'd never met. A child they'd helped raise for 9 years while enabling Jessica's chaos. After my parents went to bed that night, I sat in the kitchen with Lucy. She was nothing like I expected. Nothing like Jessica. While my sister had been loud and demanding, Lucy was quiet and thoughtful, with serious brown eyes and a gentle smile. "Do you like to read?" I asked, noticing a worn copy of Harry Potter on the kitchen counter. "I love it," she said softly. "But Grandma says I read too much. She says I should do something useful instead." Over cups of hot chocolate, Lucy slowly opened up. She told me about her life with my parents, how Grandma sighed heavily whenever she had to make Lucy dinner, how Grandpa complained about the cost of her school supplies. They didn't hit her or starve her, but their resentment was palpable in every interaction. I spent the next week taking time off work, getting to know my niece. We went for ice cream, visited the local library, and talked about everything and nothing. Lucy was smart, kind, and remarkably resilient. Despite everything she'd been through, she showed me her Strata report cards that no one had ever celebrated, her artwork that never made it to the fridge. The decision to adopt her wasn't easy. I had a career, a life I'd built carefully from scratch. But watching Lucy try to make herself smaller, quieter, less troublesome, just as I had at her age, made the choice clear. The legal process was exhausting. For months, I gathered documentation, my financial records, character references, proof of stable employment. Jessica didn't contest the termination of her parental rights. She didn't even show up for the hearing. Finally, after what felt like endless paperwork and interviews, I became Lucy's legal guardian. The day we packed up her room at my parents' house, they barely looked up from their TV show. "Don't forget to forward her school records," was all Mom said. Lucy flourished in our new life together. She decorated her room in our apartment with fairy lights and bookshelves, joined the school's debate team, made friends who came over for movie nights and study sessions. We developed our own little rituals: Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in the park, marathon sessions of board games. Monthly visits to Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George became a highlight for both of us. They doted on Lucy the way loving grandparents should, proudly displaying her artwork and report cards, remembering her favorite foods, listening to her stories with genuine interest. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Lucy turned 14, growing into a confident, compassionate teenager who consistently made the honor roll. My parents never called to check on her, never sent birthday cards, never asked how she was doing. But Lucy didn't seem to mind. She had found her real family. The phone call from my parents came on a Saturday morning. "We'd like you and Lucy to come visit," Mom said, her voice suspiciously cheerful. "We miss her." After 5 years of silence, their sudden interest set off alarm bells, but I decided to go. Lucy deserved to make her own choices about family relationships, and I didn't want to be the one standing in her way. The moment we walked through their front door, I understood why they'd called. Jessica was there, sitting on the couch like she'd never left. "Lucy," she cried, jumping up and rushing toward my niece. "Oh, Beatty, I've missed you so much." I watched Lucy's face carefully. She stood frozen, emotions flickering across her features. Hope, fear, confusion, longing. Jessica wrapped her in a tearful embrace, while our parents looked on disapprovingly. "I've changed," Jessica announced, wiping her eyes. "I've realized what's important. I want my daughter back." The word "back" hit me like a slap, like Lucy was a borrowed sweater she'd finally decided to reclaim. "I'm living in Phoenix now," Jessica continued, "with Robert. He's got a great job, and we have a beautiful house. Lucy would love it there." "Do you have a job?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Jessica's smile faltered. "Well, not right now, but Robert makes enough for all of us." "And what happens if things don't work out with Robert?" I pressed. "What's your backup plan?" "Why are you being so negative?" Mom snapped. "Your sister is trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I laughed incredulously. The right thing would have been not abandoning her daughter for 5 years. The right thing would have been sending birthday cards, making phone calls, showing any interest at all in Lucy's life. "I made mistakes," Jessica wailed, "but she's my daughter." "Stop being selfish, Robin," Dad cut in. "You've done your part, but Lucy needs her real mother now. You can have your own children if you want to play mommy so badly." I stared at them, stunned by their cruelty. These people had failed not one but 2 daughters. They had enabled Jessica's irresponsibility for decades and had never once in 5 years asked how Lucy was doing in school or what her interests were. They thought they could just restart the cycle of dysfunction. "Lucy isn't a toy you can pass around," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She's a person who needs stability and real love, not empty promises." "Where were you when she had nightmares, when she was sick, when she won the school spelling bee?" Where were any of you? You have no right. She's my child, Jessica screamed. A child you abandoned. I shot back. A child you left with people who resented her existence. A child who deserved better than all of you. Lucy, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly grabbed my hand. We're leaving, I announced, squeezing her hand reassuringly. And don't you dare try to contact us. Jessica's call came exactly a week after our confrontation. When I saw her number, I almost didn't answer, but something told me to record the conversation, a habit I developed after years of dealing with difficult clients. Hey sis, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I've been thinking about our situation, and I think I have a solution that could work for everyone. What situation? Lucy, of course. Look, I know you've gotten attached to her, and I know you make good money at your fancy job, so here's the deal. Give me $150,000, and I won't sue for custody. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Excuse me. It's really a win-win, Jessica continued casually, as if she wasn't trying to sell her own child. You get to keep Lucy, and I get enough money to start fresh. You can afford it with your salary. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice shaking. You're trying to sell your daughter to me. Don't be so dramatic. I'm just being practical. You want Lucy. I need money. Simple business transaction. She's your child, Jessica, not a used car. Fine, she snapped, her sweet tone vanishing. Have it your way. Also, I'll sue for custody, and you'll never see her again. How's that for practical? She hung up, and I sat there clutching my phone, feeling sick to my stomach. The lawsuit came 3 days later. Jessica's new boyfriend had hired her a slick lawyer who specialized in family court. The initial filing painted Jessica as a reformed mother who had overcome hardship to create a stable home for her daughter, while portraying me as a manipulative aunt who had taken advantage of a temporary situation. In court, Jessica played her role perfectly. Tears streamed down her face as she told the judge about her journey of personal growth and how she found stability with her new partner. She claimed I had alienated Lucy from her, that I was using her daughter to prove I was better than my sister. Our parents testified on her behalf, claiming they'd only asked me to take Lucy temporarily while Jessica got back on her feet. Dad even suggested I was emotionally manipulating Lucy to turn her against her mother. I sat there listening to their lies, watching them spin their web of deception. But I had come prepared. Your Honor, my lawyer said, I'd like to submit an audio recording into evidence. Jessica's face went pale as her voice filled the courtroom. Give me $150,000, and I won't sue for custody. You want Lucy, I need money. Simple business transaction. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's lawyer stammered, trying to object, but the damage was done. Our parents sat frozen in their seats, for once without excuses to make for their perfect daughter. Then Lucy stood up. At 14, she seemed suddenly older, more confident than I'd ever seen her. I want to stay with Robin, she said clearly. My mother abandoned me. Robin chose me. She's my real family. I watched Jessica's face crumple, not in genuine grief, but in the realization that she'd lost her leverage. Our parents couldn't meet anyone's eyes, and Lucy stood tall, finally free of the weight of her mother's shadow. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Not only did I retain full custody of Lucy, but Jessica was barred from any contact with her daughter. The judge called her attempt to sell custody morally reprehensible and a clear indication of unfitness as a parent. I watched Jessica crumble in her seat as the ruling was read. Her boyfriend, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, stood up and walked out without a word. Later, I heard he'd left her the same day, disgusted by her attempt to sell her own child. My parents tried to catch us in the courthouse parking lot. "Robin, please," Mom called out. "We can work this out as a family." I turned to face them one last time. "Family? You haven't been family to either of us in years. Lucy deserves better than what you did to me, what you let Jessica do to her." "But where will Jessica go?" Dad demanded. Robert left her. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course. Still worried about Jessica, even now. Some things never change. Jessica returned to her original residence with our parents. The golden child, still pampered, still given a pass, still not maturing. This time, however, she had lost something priceless as a result of her mistakes. Life continued. As though the burden of doubt had finally been removed, Lucy flung herself back into her studies with newfound vigor. She began taking photography classes, joined the school newspaper team, and expressed interest in pursuing a college degree in journalism. As we were preparing supper one evening, she asked, "You know what's funny?" Because my mother kept departing, I believed for years that I was flawed. However, I now see that she was the issue. She was only capable of loving herself. In awe of her knowledge, I gave her a firm hug. "You're the strongest person I know, kiddo." Grandpa George and Grandma Eleanor continued to be our pillars of support. Sundays became a holy day at their home. They preserved newspaper clippings of every item Lucy wrote for the school paper, boasted to their friends about her accomplishments, and proudly hung her photographs in their living room. One day, Grandma Eleanor told me, "You two saved each other," as we watched Lucy teach Grandpa George how to operate his new digital camera. "Just like George and I tried to save you." She was correct. I had discovered the family I had always desired by attempting to provide Lucy with the upbringing I was never able to have. We chose it together, not the one I was born into. I still sometimes receive texts from my parents about Jessica's most recent drama, but I choose to ignore them. Lucy said she prefers it that way and hasn't spoken to her mother since the court battle. After burning, certain bridges ought to remain ashes. Lucy took first place in a student journalism competition held around the state last week. I reflected on the frightened 9-year-old child I'd met years ago and the self-assured adolescent she'd grown into as I watched her get her prize. I reflected on broken cycles, healed wounds, and unrestricted love.
With a devious smile, I disabled the security system at Nathan and Elise's house. A simple trip under the guise of a neighborly visit, yet harboring sinister intentions. I let myself in, relishing the opportunity to unravel the peace in their perfect little world. "Arya, what a surprise!" Elise greeted me, her smile tightening ever so slightly. "Hello, dear," I replied, feigning warmth. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by." Nathan emerged, his brow furrowed as he sensed the tension in Elise's voice. "Everything okay?" "Of course," I assured him, patting his arm in mock affection. "Just catching up with my daughter." The lies rolled off my tongue with ease, concealing the bitterness that had festered for years. Sweet, naive Elise, convinced her life was finally on track with Nathan and their son Leo. How little she knew of the darkness I intended to unleash. Leo bounded in, interrupting our strained exchange. "Grandma!" he exclaimed, running into my embrace. I held him tightly, a twisted sense of love mingling with my resentment. This innocent child would soon bear witness to the consequences of his father's hubris. "Why don't we have some lemonade?" Elise suggested, her voice strained. As we settled in the living room, I surveyed their modest abode, a far cry from the opulence I had envisioned for my daughter, all because of Nathan and his feeble aspirations. "So, how's the business going?" I inquired, a serpent smile playing on my lips. Nathan's expression darkened. "We've hit a few snags, but nothing we can't overcome." "I'm sure," I replied, my tone dripping with false concern. "You know, there are always alternative routes to financial stability." Elise tensed, recognizing the familiar glint in my eye. "Mother, please don't start." "I'm simply offering my guidance, dear," I countered, feigning innocence. After all, a little darkness might light up the truth. Nathan frowned, oblivious to the underlying threat in my words. Elise, however, paled, her eyes pleading for me to stop. But I had no intention of relenting, not until I had torn down the illusion of happiness they clung to so desperately. "Arya, I think it's best if you leave," Nathan stated firmly, his patience wearing thin. I rose, my smile unwavering. Of course, I wouldn't dream of overstaying my welcome. As I stepped out, I cast one final glance at the fractured family, reveling in the knowledge that this was merely the beginning. The darkness I had unleashed would consume them, and Elise would have no choice but to return to my embrace. A sinister chuckle escaped my lips as I whispered, "Let the games begin." In the weeks that followed my visit, cracks began to show in Nathan and Elise's once perfect life. A few anonymous calls questioning the integrity of Nathan's business partner were all it took to plant the seeds of doubt. "This is the third complaint this month," Nathan grumbled, tossing the phone aside in frustration. "What's going on?" Elise frowned, her brow furrowed with concern. "Derek wouldn't do anything underhanded. You've known him for years." "I thought so too, but these allegations..." Nathan trailed off, running his hands through his hair. Sensing an opportunity, I chimed in with feigned sympathy. "You know, in situations like these, it's best to explore all options, even if it means considering the unthinkable." Elise shot me a warning look, but I pressed on undeterred. "Have you thought about diversifying your investments? A little risk could yield substantial rewards." "Mother, please," Elise snapped, her patience wearing thin. "We're not going to jeopardize our financial security on some harebrained scheme." But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I could see the gears turning in Nathan's mind. A few days later, my phone rang with the call I'd been anticipating. "Arya, it's me." Nathan's voice crackled through the line. "I need your advice on something." I suppressed a triumphant smile. "Of course, dear. What seems to be the trouble?" Nathan hesitated, his words laced with uncertainty. "It's about the business. With all these rumors surrounding Derek, I've been thinking about protecting our assets." "A wise decision," I assured him, my tone dripping with false concern. "In times like these, diversification is key." Thus began my careful manipulation, steering Nathan towards increasingly risky financial ventures under the guise of securing his family's future. All the while, I fanned the flames of suspicion surrounding Derek, driving a wedge between him and my naive daughter. "He's been acting strange lately," I whispered to Elise one day, my voice laced with faux worry. "Secretive phone calls, unexplained absences. I'm just concerned for you and Leo." Elise's eyes widened, and I could see the doubt taking root. "You don't think?" "I'm not accusing anyone, dear," I backpedaled, feigning innocence. "But it's better to be cautious, isn't it?" As the tensions in their household escalated, fueled by my carefully orchestrated lies, I reveled in the unfolding drama. Elise found herself torn between her loyalty to her husband and the societal pressure to trust her mother's guidance. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she confided in me one day, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Seizing the opportunity, I pulled her into a comforting embrace, whispering words of reassurance that only served to deepen her confusion. With each passing day, the rift between Nathan and Elise grew wider, their once strong bond fraying under the weight of my manipulation. Soon I knew the fragile threads holding their family together would snap, and Elise would have no choice but to turn to me for guidance. The thought filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. My revenge was unfolding perfectly, and the darkness I had unleashed would consume them all. The weeks dragged on, and the tension in Nathan and Elise's household was palpable. My carefully orchestrated lies had taken root, driving a wedge between them that grew deeper with each passing day. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Elise confided in me one evening, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "The business is suffering, and Nathan is convinced Derek is behind it all." I clucked my tongue in feigned sympathy, fighting back a triumphant smile. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you're going through this." Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I leaned in conspiratorially. "You know, I've had my suspicions about Derek for a while now." Elise's eyes widened, and I could see the doubt taking root. "What do you mean?" "Well, it's just little things," I began, my voice laced with careful manipulation. "The way he's been distancing himself lately. Those secretive phone calls. It all seems rather suspicious, doesn't it? Elise chewed her lip, her brow furrowed in contemplation. But he's been Nathan's friend for years. Why would he sabotage the business? Money can change people, dear, I said solemnly, tightening my embrace. And Derek's always had a taste for the finer things. The seed had been planted, and I could see the wheels turning in Elise's mind. With a few well-timed nudges, her trust in her husband would crumble, and she would turn to me for guidance. Sure enough, a few days later, Elise approached me with a haunted expression. "Mother, I need to talk to you about something." I gestured for her to sit, feigning concern. "What's troubling you, dear?" Elise took a deep breath, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I confronted Derek about the rumors, and he completely lost it. He started ranting about how ungrateful Nathan is and how he deserves a bigger cut of the profits." I gasped, my eyes widening in mock horror. "Oh, Elise, that's terrible. You must be so shaken." Pulling her into a tight embrace, I whispered soothingly, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm here for you." As Elise clung to me, her shoulders shaking with barely suppressed sobs, I fought back a twisted grin. The web of lies I had woven was tightening around them, and soon they would all be ensnared in my trap. In the days that followed, the tension between Nathan and Derek escalated, fueled by Elise's accusations and my carefully planted insinuations. Tempers flared, and harsh words were exchanged, culminating in a public confrontation that threatened to tear their partnership apart. "You're making a huge mistake, Nathan," Derek snarled, his face flushed with anger. "Elise is the one you should be questioning, not me." Nathan's jaw clenched, his eyes flickering towards Elise, who stood by my side, her expression a mix of guilt and uncertainty. "Don't listen to him, dear," I murmured, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "He's just trying to deflect blame." As the two men traded heated accusations, each convinced of the other's betrayal, I couldn't help but revel in the chaos I had created. The once unbreakable bond between them was shattering before my very eyes, and Elise was caught in the crossfire, torn between her loyalty to her husband and the societal pressure to trust her mother's guidance. When the dust settled, Nathan stormed off, his face contorted with rage and hurt, leaving Elise to seek solace in my embrace once more. "Oh, sweetheart," I cooed, stroking her hair as she wept. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." But deep down, a twisted sense of satisfaction unfurled within me. The seeds of doubt and mistrust I had sown were bearing bitter fruit, and soon the darkness I had unleashed would consume them all. With each tear that fell, Elise inched closer to the abyss I had so carefully constructed, and I reveled in the knowledge that my revenge was finally within reach. The aftermath of the confrontation between Nathan and Derek was like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. The once strong bonds that held their family together were reduced to smoldering embers, fragile and easily scattered by the slightest breeze. "I can't believe you would accuse Derek like that," Nathan spat, his eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. "After everything we've been through together." Elise flinched, her gaze flickering towards me, seeking guidance in the chaos I had so carefully orchestrated. "Nathan, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "You have to understand I was only trying to protect us." "By believing the lies your mother has been feeding you?" Nathan shook his head, his jaw clenched in barely restrained anger. "I thought we were a team, Elise. I thought we trusted each other." I fought back a twisted smile, reveling in the fractures I had created within their once perfect union. Elise's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she turned to me, silently begging for reassurance. "Don't listen to him, sweetheart," I murmured, wrapping my arm around her shoulders in a show of maternal support. "He's just lashing out because the truth hurts." Nathan's gaze hardened, his eyes flickering between us with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "You know what? I can't do this right now. I need some space." Before Elise could respond, he had grabbed his keys and stormed out, the door slamming behind him with a resounding finality. Elise crumpled against me, her body racked with sobs as the weight of the situation finally crashed down upon her. "What have I done, Mother? Our family is falling apart." "Shh, sweetheart," I soothed, stroking her hair with a tenderness that belied the twisted satisfaction coiling within me. "This isn't your fault. Nathan is the one who chose to walk away." As Elise clung to me, seeking comfort in the very source of her turmoil, I couldn't help but revel in the darkness I had unleashed. The once unbreakable bonds that held their family together were fraying, and soon they would unravel completely, leaving Elise with no choice but to turn to me for guidance. In the days that followed, the tension in their household was palpable, a heavy silence punctuated by the occasional heated exchange. Leo, their young son, found himself caught in the crossfire, his innocent eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Why is Daddy so angry?" he asked me one day, his small hand clutching mine as we sat in the park. I fought back a sneer, schooling my features into a mask of concern. "Your daddy and mommy are just going through a rough patch, sweetheart, but everything will be all right." Even as the words left my lips, I knew they were a lie. The darkness I had unleashed would consume them all, and there would be no escape from the consequences of my revenge. As the days turned into weeks, the strain began to take its toll on Leo. His once bright demeanor dimmed, and reports from his teacher painted a concerning picture of a child struggling to cope with the turmoil at home. "He's become withdrawn and distracted," the teacher confided in Elise during a parent-teacher conference. "I'm worried about his emotional well-being." Elise's face crumpled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she turned to me for support. "Oh, Mother, what have I done? This is all my fault." "Nonsense, dear," I soothed, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "You were only trying to protect your family." But even as the words left my lips, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction unfurl within me. The darkness I had unleashed was spreading, tendrils of doubt and mistrust reaching out to ensnare even the most innocent among them. As we left the school, Elise's shoulders slumped with the weight of guilt and uncertainty, her once unwavering faith in her family's bond shattered by the machinations of my own making. And in that moment, I knew that my revenge was within reach. The fractures I had created were deepening, and soon the darkness would consume them all, leaving Elise with no choice but to turn to me for guidance and solace. The thought filled me with a twisted sense of triumph, and I couldn't help but revel in the bitter fruits of my labor. The once perfect family I had so envied was crumbling before my very eyes, and I savored every delicious moment of their descent into chaos. As the weeks dragged on, the fractures within Nathan and Elise's once perfect family deepened, fueled by the web of lies and manipulation I had so carefully constructed. Elise found herself caught in the crossfire, torn between her loyalty to her husband and the societal pressure to trust her mother's guidance. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she confided in me one evening, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion and unshed tears. I fought back a twisted smile, schooling my features into a mask of concern. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you're going through this." Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I leaned in conspiratorially. "You know, I've had my doubts about Nathan's business partner for a while now." Elise's brow furrowed, and I could see the doubt taking root in her mind. "What do you mean, Mother?" "Well, it's just little things," I began, my voice laced with careful manipulation. "The way he's been distancing himself lately, those secretive phone calls, it all seems rather suspicious, doesn't it?" Elise chewed her lip, her gaze flickering towards the framed family photo on the mantelpiece, a relic of happier times. "But Derek has been Nathan's friend for years. Why would he sabotage the business?" "Money can change people, dear," I said solemnly, tightening my embrace. "And Derek's always had a taste for the finer things." As the seed of doubt took root, I could see the wheels turning in Elise's mind. With a few well-timed nudges, her trust in her husband would crumble, and she would turn to me for guidance, seeking solace in the very source of her turmoil. Sure enough, a few days later, Elise approached me with a haunted expression. "Mother, I need to talk to you about something." I gestured for her to sit, feigning concern. "What's troubling you, dear?" Elise took a deep breath, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I confronted Derek about the rumors, and he completely lost it. He started ranting about how ungrateful Nathan is and how he deserves a bigger cut of the profits." I gasped, my eyes widening in mock horror. "Oh, Elise, that's terrible. You must be so shaken." Pulling her into a tight embrace, I whispered soothingly, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm here for you." As Elise clung to me, her shoulders shaking with barely suppressed sobs, I fought back a twisted grin. The web of lies I had woven was tightening around them, and soon they would all be ensnared in my trap. However, Even as I reveled in the chaos I had created, a small part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had taken things too far. Elise's anguish was palpable, and the pain etched on her face tugged at the fringes of my conscience, a reminder of the bond we once shared. But those fleeting moments of doubt were quickly overshadowed by the burning desire for revenge that consumed me. Nathan had taken my daughter from me, robbing me of the control and influence I had once wielded over her life. And for that, he would pay. As the days passed, Elise's suspicions towards her husband deepened, fueled by my carefully planted insinuations and the whispers of doubt that had taken root in her mind. She began to question every move Nathan made, every decision he took, until the once unbreakable trust between them lay shattered at our feet. "I can't do this anymore, Mother," she confided in me one evening, her voice trembling with anguish. "I feel like I don't even know my own husband anymore." Seizing the opportunity, I pulled her into a comforting embrace, whispering words of reassurance that only served to deepen her confusion. "It's going to be all right, sweetheart. I'm here for you no matter what." But even as the words left my lips, I couldn't deny the twisted sense of satisfaction that unfurled within me. The darkness I had unleashed was spreading, tendrils of doubt and mistrust reaching out to ensnare even the strongest of bonds. And in that moment, I knew that my revenge was within reach. The fractures I had created were deepening, and soon the darkness would consume them all, leaving Elise with no choice but to turn to me for guidance and solace. The thought filled me with a twisted sense of triumph, and I couldn't help but revel in the bitter fruits of my labor. The once perfect family I had so envied was crumbling before my very eyes, and I savored every delicious moment of their descent into chaos. Little did I know, however, that the very darkness I had unleashed would soon come back to haunt me, casting its shadow over my own life in ways I could never have foreseen. As the weeks dragged on, the fractures within Nathan and Elise's once perfect family deepened, fueled by the web of lies and manipulation I had so carefully constructed. Little did I know, however, that the very darkness I had unleashed would soon come back to haunt me, casting its shadow over my own life in ways I could never have foreseen. It all began with a single phone call, the shrill ring piercing the silence of my living room like a knife. "Hello?" I answered, my voice laced with a false sweetness that had become second nature. "Arya, it's Nathan." His tone was clipped, devoid of the warmth I had grown accustomed to hearing. "We need to talk." A frisson of unease rippled through me, but I quickly schooled my features into a mask of concern. "Of course, dear. What seems to be the trouble?" There was a pause, and when Nathan spoke again, his words were laced with a steely resolve that sent a chill down my spine. "I know what you've been doing, Arya. The lies, the manipulation. It all stops now." My breath caught in my throat, but I quickly rallied, feigning innocence. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me," Nathan snapped, his voice rising in anger. "You've been sabotaging my business, spreading rumors about Derek, poisoning Elise's mind against me, all because you can't stand to see her happy without your control." I opened my mouth to protest, but Nathan plowed on, his words hitting me like a physical blow. "Well, it ends here, Arya. I've gathered enough evidence to expose your actions to the world, and I won't rest until you face the consequences of what you've done." A twisted smile curved my lips as I realized the depth of his foolishness. "You think you can take me on, Nathan? You're gravely mistaken." "We'll see about that," he growled, and the line went dead. In the days that followed, Nathan's threats proved to be more than idle words. Piece by piece, the carefully constructed web of lies I had woven began to unravel, exposing the depths of my manipulation and deceit. Elise, her eyes wide with disbelief and hurt, confronted me, her voice trembling with barely restrained anger. "How could you, Mother? How could you do this to me, to our family?" I opened my mouth to deny the accusations, but the words died on my lips. As Nathan and Derek strode into the room, their expressions grim. "It's over, Arya," Nathan stated, his jaw set in a hard line. "We have all the evidence we need to expose your actions to the world." In that moment, the gravity of my actions crashed down upon me, and I felt a strange sense of resignation wash over me. The darkness I had unleashed had consumed me, leaving me vulnerable and exposed. "You'll never understand," I spat, my voice dripping with venom. "You took my daughter away from me, Nathan. You robbed me of the control and influence I once had over her life. Elise recoiled as if struck, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Is that what this was all about, Mother? Power and control? I met her gaze, unflinching. You were mine, Elise, and I couldn't stand to see you slip through my fingers. The words hung heavy in the air, a bitter testament to the depths of my twisted obsession. Nathan and Derek exchanged a knowing glance, their expressions hardening with resolve. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions, Arya, Nathan stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. In the days and weeks that followed, my world crumbled around me. The evidence of my misdeeds was laid bare for all to see, and the once revered matriarch found herself ostracized and scorned by the very community she had once ruled. Legal battles ensued, leaving me bound by court orders and financial penalties, a mere shadow of the formidable force I had once been. And through it all, Elise's gaze remained haunted, her trust in me irreparably shattered by the depths of my betrayal. As I sat alone in the ruins of my once proud life, the bitter taste of defeat lingering on my tongue, I couldn't help but reflect on the twisted path that had led me here. The darkness I had unleashed in pursuit of revenge had ultimately consumed me, leaving me isolated and powerless. And in the depths of my despair, a single chilling realization dawned upon me. The true victim of my machinations had been myself, ensnared by the very web of lies and manipulation I had so carefully woven. In the aftermath of my downfall, the world I had once known became a twisted, unfamiliar place. The very community that had once revered me now scorned my existence, their whispers and sidelong glances a constant reminder of the depths to which I had fallen. "Did you hear about Arya?" they would murmur, their voices laced with a mixture of pity and disdain. Such a shame, really, to think she would stoop so low. I would grit my teeth, fighting back the urge to lash out, to reassert the dominance and control that had once been my birthright. But the legal shackles that bound me were unyielding, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. And through it all, Elise's gaze remained haunted, her trust in me irreparably shattered by the depths of my betrayal. Try as I might, I could not shake the guilt that coiled within me, a bitter reminder of the bond I had so carelessly severed. "How could you, Mother?" she had whispered, her voice trembling with anguish. "How could you do this to me, to our family?" The words echoed in my mind, a constant refrain that played on a loop, taunting me with the gravity of my mistakes. But even in the depths of my despair, a twisted part of me could not help but cling to the hope that someday, somehow, Elise would find her way back to me. That the darkness I had unleashed would ultimately fade, leaving us to pick up the tattered threads of our relationship and weave them anew. It was a fool's hope, I knew, but it was all I had left. As the days turned to weeks, Nathan and Derek's relentless pursuit of justice began to bear fruit. One by one, the lies and manipulations I had so carefully constructed were exposed, laid bare for the world to see. Arya Blackwood, you stand accused of orchestrating a campaign of deceit and manipulation aimed at undermining the personal and professional lives of Nathan and Derek, the judge intoned, his voice ringing with authority. "How do you plead?" I squared my shoulders, defiance burning in my gaze. Not guilty. A ripple of murmurs swept through the courtroom, but I held my head high, unwilling to show even a hint of remorse for my actions. In the end, however, the weight of the evidence against me was overwhelming. Damning financial records, incriminating emails, and a litany of witness testimonies all painted a damning picture of my calculated deception. "Arya Blackwood, you have been found guilty on all counts," the judge pronounced, his gaze stern. "You are hereby sentenced to a term of imprisonment, as well as financial restitution to the victims of your crimes." The words rang in my ears like a death knell, shattering the last vestiges of the life I had once known. As the guards led me away, I caught a glimpse of Nathan and Derek, their expressions a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. And in that moment, I knew that my downfall was complete. The very darkness I had unleashed in pursuit of revenge had consumed me, leaving me a mere shell of the formidable force I had once been. In the months that followed, I watched from the confines of my prison cell as Nathan and Elise began the arduous process of rebuilding their lives. The road was long and fraught with challenges, but through it all, They clung to each other with a tenacity that both inspired and infuriated me. "We're a team, Elise," Nathan would murmur, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what life throws our way, we'll face it together." And Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound strength, would nod, her fingers intertwined with his in a silent vow of unity. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Watching the very family I had sought to destroy rise from the ashes of my betrayal, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as the walls of my prison cell closed in around me, I couldn't help but wonder if the price I had paid for my pursuit of revenge was truly worth it. But even in my darkest moments, a twisted part of me could not help but cling to the hope that someday, somehow, I would find a way to reclaim what I had lost. That the darkness I had unleashed would ultimately fade, leaving me to pick up the tattered threads of my life and weave them anew. It was a fool's hope, I knew, but it was all I had left.